Farmer Jenkins wiped the sweat from his brow as he strolled across his vast fields, his eyes scanning the familiar landscape. His farm used to be a lush, rich landscape, but now it was just withering away. It had been the same for years. He couldn't afford to do many renovations. But as he approached the neglected corner of his property, his jaw dropped in sheer disbelief. There, in the middle of nowhere, was a hole so immense that it seemed as though the earth had decided to swallow itself whole. How did that hole get there? The 70-year-old farmer walked around the edge of the massive hole in the ground, a colossal hole like the aftermath of a meteor strike, marred the once pristine earth. His curiosity heightened and Farmer Jenkins ambled closer, an uneasy feeling knotting in his stomach. He bent down to have a closer inspection at the risk of falling into the hole. Farmer Jenkins scratched his head in bewilderment. How had he not known about this colossal excavation? He had a gut feeling this wasn't some natural occurrence. It was man-made, deliberate. Days later, rumors reached his ears. Whispered secrets that pointed to the neighboring farmer, Brown. Perhaps he did see something? The intrigue deepened when Jenkins discovered that Brown had struck oil, an unimaginable fortune lying beneath the surface of the earth. Why didn't he share the news with his neighbor? Farmer Jenkins wanted to call him out on it. His neighbor took some time to answer. Brown, you won't believe what's on my land. It's a hole. A gigantic hole. Did you have anything to do with this? Jenkins blurted out, his voice a mix of disbelief and anger. Jenkins, old buddy, I found something big. I found oil on my land. I had to dig deep to get it. Jenkins felt a surge of emotions, shock, anger, and a tinge of jealousy. He had always considered his land the most fertile, the most promising. Oil, you say? What about my land? You think you can just dig wherever you please without asking? Brown hesitated. Look, Jenkins, I didn't think it'd be a big deal. I'll make it right, all right? I'll pay for any damages, I promise. I'll even compensate you for the oil. The figure was staggering, enough to mend the damages and then some. But Jenkins, a shrewdman beneath the sun-worn hat, decided to play his cards wisely. Days later, Jenkins received a letter from Brown's lawyer outlining the compensation offer. The damages were mentioned, but there was a quiet whisper of intent to acquire the land. Anger bubbled within Jenkins, and he clenched the letter in his fists. He wouldn't let Brown take advantage of this situation. He was prepared to fight back to keep what was rightfully his. Farmer Jenkins and his wife Martha were worried as the court date loomed near. In a dimly lit courtroom, tension hung heavy in the air. The lawyer, a silver-tongued charmer, tried to convince the jury that Jenkins's land was practically begging to be sold. His standpoint was that Farmer Brown discovered the oil first, so he should have first claimed its use. Jenkins stood ever vigilant against his aggressors. He made it clear that he wouldn't budge for anything. Brown glanced down at his phone and went pale. Clearly, something was wrong. There was a third party interested in the land, but they had stayed in the dark until now. Then there was the sound of the doors behind the men opening. Jenkins looked behind him and saw men in suits entering the courtroom. "Who are you?" the judge asked, seemingly taken aback by the rudeness. "Mr. Brown is merely one of our representatives. He contacted us when he first found the oil. I think you'll find that we have more than the right to take it off Mr. Jenkins's hands." The men ended up being a hungry oil company that wanted to grab Jenkins's oil to refine and sell themselves. "Mr. Jenkins, you don't have the means to refine the oil yourself," the lawyer said. "My client would end up doing that anyway. You'd make more money selling your property than selling unrefined oil." Jenkins sat there frozen. What the lawyer said was true, but it was his land. It had been in his family for generations. His morals were bigger than money. The lawyer that represented Jenkins didn't seem too happy when the rival lawyer brought up mineral rights. Was that a real thing? Surely they were making it up. The courtroom fell silent as the same question was on everyone's mind. Was it true? Did they have rights to the oil? And if they did, would that mean he would have to sell his property? Jenkins was unfamiliar with the law and decided to do a bit of research to find the best lawyer that he could afford. His name was Jonathan Myers, and he had offered to help him pro bono. Jenkins naively assumed that it was because he wanted to see that justice was served, but he was wrong. He watched the lawyer give a smirk. Had he set the farmer up? Perhaps the company was paying him to do this? Mr. Myers told the courtroom that his opposition had made a convincing case. He stated that the company had done their research and normally they would have the case in the bag. Jenkins knew that he had to try and do something to stop the lawyer from ruining him. He had lost all hope that he would see a single cent of the money the company would get from his oil. But more importantly, he lost his livelihood in the process. He was now standing, something that was disrespectful to everyone in the courtroom. The judge told him to sit down, but he defied the order. "I need to speak with my lawyer for a moment," the farmer said, his voice unwavering. He wasn't scared of all the city folk in the room. The judge waved his hand and let Myers come back to the stand. Myers' facial expression showed Jenkins that he didn't understand what he meant, or was he just playing him? "What do you mean?" the lawyer asked with a puzzled look on his face. "You were about to take me down. It didn't sound like you were defending me there," Jenkins said with anger rising in his voice. The lawyer sighed and explained to Jenkins that it was all part of his plan. He promised the farmer that he was going to get his land back for him no matter what. The lawyer stepped back up and apologized to the judge. Jenkins sat back and watched. His farm was now in the hands of the lawyer. "But I don't believe that the rights belong to the corporation, neither of them. Mr. Jenkins has rights to both." The courtroom fell silent at the revelation, but now came the hard part. The lawyer continued to explain that the only way that Mr. Jenkins wouldn't have surface rights was if he had ever struck a deal with any companies before. The greedy company didn't just have automatic rights. With Jenkins' lawyer's last statement, the opposing side's lawyer shot up again and took the stand, but he didn't seem to have anything to say. He had hoped that Jenkins would crack under the pressure. Days turned to weeks, and the courtroom became the stage for a battle of wills. Farmer Jenkins wasn't going to take any more suggestions from anybody. The judge gave him a chance to take the stand. "This land has been in my family for generations. It's not for sale, no matter what riches lie beneath it." The room was dismissed for a short recess. Farmer Brown kept giving the Jenkins dirty looks as they walked around the court hall. The court was filled again. Everyone took their seats and waited for the judge to be seated. Soon they would know what the outcome would be. What did the people decide? Finally, the jury returned and the room erupted into whispers. The police officer came in and took the envelope from the jury. The foreman stood, his expression unreadable. "In favor of Mr. Jenkins," he declared. Mrs. Jenkins burst out into tears. She was overjoyed. Relief washed over Farmer Jenkins and he shot a triumphant look at Brown. He shook his lawyer's hand and walked out of the courtroom. In the end, Farmer Jenkins stood atop the hill, surveying his land with a sense of accomplishment. The massive hole, once a symbol of intrusion, now represented the doorway to a newfound prosperity.